Okay, now I'm getting mad. AEW are resting their laurels on just existing and not evolving. Actually, better yet, their definition of evolution is just obtaining talent with no rewards and diminished returns. This is costing not only the company, but the world of wrestling in general and any remaining credibility it had. We have several companies trying to establish themselves as wrestling companies and not sports entertainment. While you want to be the Galactus of the wrestling industry, you also pride yourself on being a late 90s WCW mark. Look what happened shortly after that. Here's how you're feeding your ego and not the fan. Matches not having any clear direction afterward. I'm not going to bring up how rematches are not even created here to have valid angles consistently ongoing, but after each match for a championship, it's just on to the next one with no build. Compelling TV, isn't it? I sound like a broken record, but it's true. Technology makes us spoiled since we could cherry pick what we want to watch on other outlets, but this should also highlight what people want to see more. If a fly-by-night viewer occasionally tuned into the show, they would think Daniel Garcia was the champion every other week. As I'm writing this, Daniel Garcia faced mail-in mocks for the main event of AEW Dynamite as the follow-up to their biggest title match of the year on pay-per-view. Why should anyone care? Now, this isn't totally bad element since the 80s and 90s would feature other talent as far as main events. However, his booking always has the main event or main event interest piece front heavy in the beginning of the show. The diminishing show is diminishing returns. And where do we go next week? I guess we'll have Nyla Rose being on the main event next week. Jade looks incredibly hot, and then someone watches her wrestle and then realize there's nothing to her and this is bait and switch act. And then the following week we will close out the show with Orange Cassidy facing Miro. Why do we care to watch? I can attest, I'm not tuning in to watch Jericho try to coin a phrase and be the next Gene Simmons. Kiss this, Chris. These are not reporters, these are spokespersons. That hilarious mess of a post-pay-per-view media scrum was an absolute embarrassment of softball questions from Meltzer, Alvarez, and any other fan that wants to grab a microphone. These were layups that heavily under the influence of something Tony Khan wildly would elaborate on ad nauseum. Before anyone starts pointing fingers and yelling at me for making accusations, use your heads. Nobody acts or speaks like this in the right state of mind. Vince McMahon never acted like this incoherently in front of a media scrum, and this guy was on trial and facing prison at one point for distribution of steroids. Talk about poise. TK is not graceful looking or sounding up there even after these dangling carrots thrown at him from his paid staff writers. These are not credible sources anymore for the news since their opinions are so biased. It's one thing to talk about the history of wrestling with them, but it's another when they tell you what isn't good. Tony Khan happened to just have these writers that have a gripe against WWE to work with since the talent at WWE no longer wants to be friends with Meltzer or Sean Ross Sapp. This payola of sorts gives the wrestling journalists bad names, but then they bury themselves more as Dick Sispan, that's fine, and cohorts want to white knight in this crusade against a company that got them to the forefront to begin with. The boiling point of proof was showing how awful these people are with the reporting when the MJF situation happened. That is inexcusable for people to report fake information, but it's more of an indictment on fans to blindly follow the blind. Same goes for awful shows like JD from New York. These are hate mongers feeding Tony's undeserved egos. He has enough money. He doesn't need your respect or cash itself. That's another list for some other time though. No return or negative returns. You hate the Federation so much you are becoming them. Sure, getting headliners is establishing your roster with names, but these returns are past diminished. Let's look at the latest case here. The Hardy Boy reunion was dead as soon as Jeff danced on the runway as he went to save his brother from death. This is just someone throwing away money as soon as there is a flavor of the month coming out. Tony doesn't care about storylines. He cares about cheap pops here. That's why he loves letting people curse on TV. But this man really doesn't have a desire to follow through with the connections that fans have with his faithful stars. If you ask me, I wouldn't want to see a Hardy reunion. I'd rather watch Eddie Kingston become champion, or a company establish an actual good women's wrestler. Jane ain't it, my friend, but she has sexiness to her marketing, so that kind of makes sense. Just don't let anyone watch her matches. The whole idea of their wrestlers being just good enough for a selected fan base is getting really fucking old, Tony. Let's look at Jon Moxley, a guy who prior to rehab was mailing it in every single match he had, and even resorted to his laziness with making a double arm DDT become a lazy suplex, with no explanation at all. Now, his crappiness was bogged down with Bryan Danielson into obscurity since he's in a fight club with Mox and an indie darling everyone wanted to push, but he's relegated to other tournaments elsewhere since he sucks. I'm sure I'll get crap for that, but if he's so important, why isn't he on TV, and why isn't he mandated to appear alongside the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club on a weekly basis? MJF was absolutely right about every fucking thing. Catering to yourself. I've been calling this for a year. The unprofessionalism of the money mark millionaire is poked out occasionally with random shouting on the YouTube channel and in front of the live crowd. Camera phones have killed his aura. Subtle movements from guys like Cody Rhodes sitting next to him was the maximum capacity he should be involved in as far as on camera. After the outburst at the podium the other night, you should be off camera as far away as possible. Your Twitter needs to be actively managed too, sir. Between excuses and Rachel virtue signaling, your father may have to spend another $1 billion repairing the family legacy. Maybe stay away from social media and work on things like repairing your communication skills. Perhaps get in some good graces of the video game company that seems to quit because of Kenny Omega trying to tell experienced specialists how to do things. Unreal. Get him away from that project now. Tony, going on air as character will kill your company. Look into Vince Russo coming into creative forefront of WCW. It killed the company. Use the peers that you hired in the beginning. Those are the Arns, the Tullys, the Jakes, and maybe most importantly, Jim Ross. His broadcast is a verbal eye roll for a reason. Hell, guys like Christopher Daniels and Samoa Joe could tell you how to run the show alongside William Regal. Even Mark Henry and Paul White could help out. If you cared about your company, if you cared about wrestling, you would be less involved in it. We mean that as wrestling fans. You are not Vince McMahon. Yes, he went into wrestling angles, but the man has charisma. You have pharmaceuticals. That presser the other day was an embarrassment of fans of wrestling since you clearly are just using these stars as your personal toys. Fans, there are other options out there. Between Impact and NWA, you could watch these guys create compelling stories on a week-by-week basis that perfect the craft and aren't out there to have Billy Corgan move their legs and arms for satisfaction. As much as people want to stray away from WWE, you could still have competitive matches that tell stories and aren't marathons as far as spots, something Sammy Guevara doesn't give a crap about. Tony has tried to create a new wrestling atmosphere and is now the new Herb Abrams. Enjoy your time in the sun, Tony.